The Federal Republic of Somalia has that piece of paper, but there's a question: is it a de facto nation? It does not control its own territory. It depends 100% on the international community to sustain it. It has never, ever had a one-person, one-vote election. It has an extremely suspect, political system. And the fact is that the terrorist group Al-Shabaab collects more tax revenue than the national government. So, you have a really functioning state on the one hand, Somaliland, and you have another one that's beating its chest and, making all kinds of noise, which can't even control its territory. As a matter of fact, isn't it absurd that Somalia, Mogadishu, is threatening Ethiopia when there are today thousands of Ethiopian soldiers inside Somalia that are helping the Somali government fight its own terrorism problem?
Welcome to EVN. Today I have a distinguished guest on Perspective. I have here Ambassador Tibor Nagy. He is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs from 2018 to 2021 during the Trump administration. He was a long-time career diplomat. He served as the American ambassador to Guinea and Ethiopia from 1999 to 2002. Ambassador Nagy also served as Vice Provost for International Affairs as Texas Tech for 15 years. He's currently Emeritus Professor as Texas Tech. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's start with your journey from childhood as a diplomat, that transition from child refugee to a career ambassador and diplomat. I would like to start with that. Please share your life journey with our audience.
I share that part with many in the Ethiopian diaspora because I was the child of a military officer in Hungary. And when the Soviets overthrew our brief revolution, my dad had to flee because he was condemned to death. So we walked across the snowy fields, across the border to Austria, and we were fortunate enough to come to the United States. And I have told people that we were treated so nicely by the American embassy that I decided, even as a 7-year-old child, that if I ever made it to America, my dream was to become an American diplomat. And I always kept that dream alive. And again, having been a refugee myself, one of the things that I took with me is every country I served in Africa. I served in 8 different African countries for 22 years. I did my very best to visit every single refugee camp in the country. Just, the refugees would be shocked. Here comes the American ambassador, fancy car, flying flag. And I would tell the refugees honestly, I was the only American ambassador to have ever spent time in a refugee camp as a refugee and not a visitor. I said, this is not the end of your life. No one knows what plan God has for you. So don't give up hope.
We will be discussing, some critical issues related to the Horn of Africa. Let's start with the current and hottest issue, which is the Memorandum of Understanding between the Ethiopian government and Somaliland. How do you make of it?
Well, I'm a strong supporter of the deal. I think the deal is as logical as putting a hand into a glove. Ethiopia, for much of its 2,000 years of glorious history, has always had a port. Ethiopia had a navy. It's natural, but because of colonialism, because of certain geopolitical factors, Eritrea split off to become an independent country. Ethiopia lost its port, became the largest, most populous landlocked country in the world. but it had that history of a relationship with the sea. Somaliland, on the other hand, it's a very small country, but it's been a country now for decades. It's a very proud country. It gets almost no assistance from the international community. And Ethiopia being the most powerful nation in the Horn of Africa, Somaliland needed to make a deal with somebody like that, and Ethiopia needed a port. So it looks like, a very ideological deal from the point of view.
The deal can be a win-win for both Ethiopia and Somaliland for obvious reasons. But there is also international law and international norms, as you very well know, as a diplomat. The Somaliland government or the state itself has not been internationally recognized by the UN, the AU, or any other countries because of the impediments, to become a sovereign country. You have to follow certain procedures, including being recognized as a sovereign state by the United Nations. So taking that into account, do you think that this deal can be a legitimate deal which can be implemented because of the current uproar, around the region?
Sure it can. There's what I would call a lot of clucking going on, what chickens like to cluck. When a deal makes that much sense, and each of the ones that are clucking have their own reasons for making noise, not necessarily based on reality, but on their own, interests. Because let's be honest, every single country pursues its own interests. You can pretend otherwise, but your priority in your policies is always your own interests, including the African Union, including the United Nations. And there's also a huge blend of hypocrisy there. Eritrea was allowed to become an independent country. South Sudan became an independent country. East Timor, became an independent country. Somaliland is an independent country. It only needs that piece of paper. It's almost like the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz. He was a brilliant guy, but he just needed that college diploma to make it official. So, from the point of view, the noise will decrease. Hopefully, the deal will become reality. And as the years go on, there's going to be less and less noise, and you never know what geopolitical changes will come about, and you never know when Somaliland may actually be recognized, by other countries. So my advice is to just keep calm, keep cool, and go with reality.
Well, but the federal government of Somalia, despite its weaknesses, is saying that the sovereignty of Somalia is indivisible. We are the one who is internationally recognized, and any deal on the port or any land would be a violation of the sovereignty of Somalia. And so many countries, including your own country, the United States seems to buy this call, to reject the memorandum of understanding and respect the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Somalia. So, doesn't this create an obstacle on the whole deal? And not only the deal, but given the fact that Somalia has the international support, will that not create a problem, especially for Ethiopia as a sovereign country?
It creates a lot of noise. If you look at the Federal Republic of Somalia, it is like looking in the mirror between the two. Somaliland is a de facto country, which exists in reality, but is not de jure because, as of today, it's not really recognized by anyone. Although if you go to Hargeisa, you find a lot of diplomatic missions there, whereas
Yes.
countries have consulates. And, the relationship with Taiwan is, whatever you want to call it, it's fairly formal. So there you have a de facto nation. In the other part of the mirror, you have a nation which is de jure, because yes, the Federal Republic of Somalia has that piece of paper, but there's a question: is it a de facto nation? It does not control its own territory. It depends 100% on the international community to sustain it. It has never, ever had a one-person, one-vote election. It has an extremely suspect, political system. And the fact is that the terrorist group Al-Shabaab collects more tax revenue than the national government. So, you have a really functioning state on the one hand, Somaliland, and you have another one that's beating its chest and making all kinds of noise, which can't even control its territory. As a matter of fact, isn't it absurd that Somalia, Mogadishu, is threatening Ethiopia when there are today thousands of Ethiopian soldiers inside Somalia that are helping the Somali government fight its own terrorism problem? So that situation is absurd. Again, as I said, even with the United States, the current Biden administration has something called the One Somalia policy, which basically says that Somalia and Somaliland constitute a single unit, even though there is historical, there's a strong history which could go in the other direction, but the Biden administration does not see that. However, if there's a change of administrations this coming November, and the new U.S. administration is sworn in next January, the new U.S. administration could very easily switch policies and recognize Somaliland in addition to Somalia. I mean, the fact is, Somaliland has gone its own way. It has proven itself to be a successful state, and I cannot see any scenario where the two will join together.
The fear is that this deal can trigger another round of conflict in the Horn of Africa, especially given the fact that there is now a stronger mobilization in Somalia. As you know, there was a war between Ethiopia and Somalia because of Somali irredentism. They wanted to unite the whole of the Somali people in the Horn of Africa, including in the Ogaden, Djibouti, neighboring Kenya, and the two Somalis, all the five, regions, according to this ideology, should be united. Don't you think that given this mobilization and the potential resurgence of the Al-Shabaab is the greatest threat in the Horn of Africa, not only for Ethiopia, but even for the United States. And the US has also expressed the same fear that it can, create a problem. John Kirby, a spokesperson for NSA, said a few days ago that the deal, the memorandum of understanding, poses a national security threat even to the United States of America.
Yeah, I think that any comments coming from the U.S. administration, and again, I want to stress, I do not speak for this current U.S. administration.
Yes, of course.
But any comments coming from the U.S. administration, again, it's to look at U.S. foreign policy priorities. Right now, it is a U.S. foreign policy priority to help fight Al-Shabaab, because the United States sees Al-Shabaab as a potentially international terrorist organization that could threaten the United States homeland. So for right now, it means cooperating with the Mogadishu government to help Mogadishu fight Al-Shabaab. That is the reason behind, any statements that the United States is making. It's not having to do with really the interests of Somaliland or Ethiopia regarding Ethiopia having a port.
dalkeenu maanta guud ahaan ilaahay mahadiyo jira waa nabad